Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's daily update, and in today's program, we will discuss the latest developments with regard to Operation Epic Fury, Roaring Lion. To do that, we are joined by retired Brigadier General Mark Emmett, formerly an Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, as well as an Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, a senior officer at Central Command, among other positions over the years. It's great having you with us, General.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan.
We will start with a brief discussion. You and I, we will have two additional guests joining over the course of the program. But looking at the current state of play, President Trump was asked, or rather stated during a roundtable, that if he has to put a 1 or 10, between 1 or 10 grade to the current operation, he would give it a 15. What are your remarks to that?
Well, I think we got to think about the architect looking at a half, 1/3 built. The fact remains that there's a lot of good work that's been done up to this point. The scaffolding's been done pretty well. But if we're going to build this house, we've got a long way to go. So it may be a 15 out of 10 for the first, say, 25 to 30% of the construction, but we still got many, many more things that need to be done.
And the fog of war is obviously still rampant, and as you mentioned, it is only at the first leg of this campaign. From a Karl von Clausewitz type of doctrine within the philosophical realms, war is defined as a battle of wills. And it seems like the United States and Israel are quite determined and are showcasing that not only in their statements, but also in the various activities taking place in the field. With regard to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, we are seeing defections, both from their rocket units as well as other type of divisions. And there are reports also about various arguments within the leadership itself about who to elect as the next supreme leader. All of that does spell some type of optimism, but looking at it objectively from this lens, how would you characterize it?
Well, I remember in 91 seeing the photos of Iraqi prisoners on the front lines surrendering. And while we were happy that they were doing that, they had no tactical consequence. There were still some tank fights to go, and it certainly had no strategic response. The fact is that I think that every leader understands some people are going to defect. Now, if we see a cascading defection of IRGC or Basij, especially the high leaders, I think that may have an effect. But even if we had 1,000 defections out of the IRGC right now, I don't think that would change the calculus in a equally strong-willed opponent that we're both fighting.
Indeed. Let's talk strategically for a moment, since there are clear strategic objectives on the one hand, but drawing out and even more into the strategic power competition level, this campaign really hurts the Chinese particularly, as well as the Russians to a lesser degree. But what are we to take out of the current situation from a strategic power competition type of perspective?
Well, I think two issues, and one is good and one is bad. I mean, it is clear that we are demonstrating the capability of a world force that has no peer anywhere, and it can project power without putting boots on the ground. On the other hand, I think the Chinese are sitting there clapping every day that we fight, watching the inventory numbers of our precision weapons, both offensive and defensive, going down, and knowing that we can't replace them certainly as quickly as we're using them.
With that being said, we do see the Chinese also suffering from a shortage of crude oil intake, namely the exports of roughly between 80 to 90% of Iranian crude oil to China entailed roughly 14% of its own intake on domestic consumption. This must be just one angle to the frustrations that the Chinese are clearly also showcasing, and also their statements are those that they want to see an abrupt end to the current conflict. But looking at this really in the long term, the true concerns in Beijing are if the United States completes the job and eliminates the Iranian equation, so to speak, within the equation of the so-called CRINC, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, if we manage to maneuver in such a way that there is regime change, even though there is much skepticism about the viability of such an outcome, what are we to take into account?
Well, I think number one, an end to the hostilities would certainly relieve China that the gas station, which has a flag called Iran, is back open for business.
And beyond that, from a strategic perspective, naturally, the United States and Israel have a clear goal with regard to the global architecture.
Uh, Countries are first going to look internally. Is what we're seeing in Iran for the Chinese leadership going to affect any of the internal dimensions of our society? We've got a horrible economy right now. We don't need more trouble with this. So I think they're going to look at it first on how it affects them internally. Number two, will this have any effect on any dissident activity in China? Probably not. Number three, I I think there will probably be as many people at that Chinese strategic table saying, uh, look at the power of America, we must fear them. And on the other side, they'd be saying, look at America, they're dissipating their strength. So I don't know where I come out on that, but I don't necessarily think that a resolution to the Iranian situation is going to have much of a consequence inside Beijing.
Understood. Thank you, General Kimmett. Now I'm delighted to also have Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kupelwasser join the program. Yossi formerly served as the Director General of Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs, as well as the head of the Research and Assessment Division at the IDF Intelligence Directorate, among others. Currently, he is the president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Thank you for joining us, General.
A pleasure. Sorry for the
Well,
delay.
General, no problem. We are living in interesting times, as the saying goes. But I'd like to ask you specifically, we just were speaking, General Kimmett and I, about the geostrategic landscape and whether or not the end goals or how the impact of the current conflict may ultimately trickle down into the Chinese equation, into the CRINC equation, so to speak. But from your perspective on the geostrategic landscape, there is going to be a change after, once the dust settles, so to speak, after this conflict comes to a close. What type of implications or ramifications do you expect out of this?
Well, I think that it much depends on the way it's going to end. Let's hope it's end the right way. And then I think that the experience of everybody is that the United States, together with Israel, are capable to shape the Middle East and to take care of the threats they face. And this is going to be a lesson for everybody else. And I hope that since also Iran is going to change sides, it's going to make the Chinese-Russian coalition weaker and are going to be better chances to bring about a solution also to the Ukraine-Russia war and to have a much better, much stabler world. It was a world order that is more in line with the reality of the threats that we are all facing, terror from Islamic radicals and so on and so forth. And that is going to be a very good message for the entire international community. If, on the other hand, unfortunately, the Iranian regime will manage to survive this operation, then the outcome is going to be very negative, and the bad guys are going to have their day. I sincerely hope this is not going to be the case. There's some option that is going to be reaching an end, which is somewhere in between. That the regime is going to change, but not entirely, and that it is going to give up on its capabilities, and the nuclear project, and the ballistic missiles project, and the proxies project. And if this is going to be the case, it's still going to be a good outcome, and I hope it's going to be something that would be seen as a success for Israel and the United States. But for the time being, until we reach the end, I think this cooperation between Israel and the United States in trying to reshape the Middle East with this really very strong show of force is going to be seen as a proof of how powerful the United States is and how close the relations are between Israel and the United States to fight together, shoulder to shoulder. It's a really show of confidence of each countering the other, and the show of force.
Indeed. Well, General Kimmett, I'd like to turn to you once more and ask you specifically, since historically speaking, there are not a lot of cases where such an air campaign ultimately had the desired impact of potential regime change, seeing the transition of a government aligning itself with one side or another. We did see circumstances that it did subsequently bring about a sort of coup d'etat or regime change, such as in Serbia, for instance, where obviously you served as part of your NATO contingent. But ultimately, looking in the various unprecedented levels of military warfare employed, just to put things in perspective, if the shock and awe, so to speak, that was unleashed upon Iraq in 2003 was devastating to the Iraqi forces, according to Admiral Bradford Cooper, in the current campaign of Epic Fury, they unleashed even double the ordnance in the first 24 hours and have been only in the first stages of the so-called escalation dominance ladder, which is quite significant and unprecedented in every historic category.
Well, so I generally don't agree with the theory that strategic bombing can end a war. Strategic bombing can lead to the next phase. And what I've been focused on is reading up on Linebacker 2, which was the operation in 1972 that the United States employed on the North Vietnamese by just completely, to use President Trump's term, obliterated Haiphong Harbor and military facilities inside of Hanoi. The single purpose of that mission was to drive the North Vietnamese back to the negotiating table. And I think the best that we can expect out of this operation is that we will get back to negotiations, but on much harsher terms than when the Iranians walked away. Any notion that we're going to change the regime without putting boots on the ground, I think is hope, not a plan. And as Secretary Hegseth said, we're not doing regime change. We are changing the regime, but this notion of regime change where we're going to be in there teaching democracy, setting up stock exchanges, serving as a coalition or an occupation authority, that's just not going to happen. So the question is, what can air power achieve? It will not cause them to surrender, but it may be sufficient coercive in order to get back to the diplomacy.
Indeed. Well, I agree that ultimately boots on the ground are a necessary ingredient, but we don't necessarily need American boots on the ground or Israeli boots on the ground to make that happen. There's plenty of room to maneuver at this stage, and we're still very early on, as we mentioned in the beginning of our program, to really know everything that is happening currently on the ground, so to speak. But I'm delighted that we have our third guest also joining our program today, namely retired Major General Yaakov Amidro, who formerly served as Israel's National Security Advisor, as well as the head of the IDF Research and Assessment Division at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. Thank you for joining us, General. I'd like to immediately also ask you to give us 2 cents on your perspective to the geostrategic landscape currently unfolding in light of this conflict, and to what degree are we able to translate the tactical achievements that are quite apparent into a strategic victory?
I agree that to guarantee a regime change by Air Force capabilities and bombing Iran is probably almost impossible. Will the Americans and the Israelis will have boots on the ground and they will use other proxies to do it? I don't know. I don't have any evidence that there are such forces in Iran that the Israelis and the Americans can bring them together and to act and to be efficient enough to topple the regime. And we should not promise ourselves something that cannot be promised. What can be achieved is whoever will be the regime, will it be the same regime with the son or with someone else? What we can guarantee, the regime in Tehran will not have the ability to destroy Israel, to attack neighboring countries, to endanger American interests, and so on and so forth. That can be guaranteed. We can destroy the capabilities of the Iranians to do these aggressive actions, as I mentioned, by destroying their facilities, their capabilities, their launchers, their missiles, the command and control system, and to be in a position that whenever they try again to build the nuclear project or to resume the manufacturing of long-range missiles or to rebuild the Navy, and so on and so forth. What we, Americans and Israel, decide that this is something that the Iranians will not have. Doesn't matter who is the regime. The regime might stay because we cannot build the opposition of Iran. The capabilities to attack will not be in their hands. In a way, kind of Syrian situation. Country that we don't like the regime, we don't trust the regime, but they don't have the capabilities to make any damage to Israel in the future. It's different. It's huge country. It's huge industry that we cannot destroy everything in Iran, and we should not destroy everything in Iran. But we should make all the efforts to be sure that at the end of the operation, when we say enough is enough to ourselves, it will be after the assessment will be clear. The Iranians will not have the potential to go back, not to the nuclear project, not to the missile project, not to rebuild the other elements that we decide should be destructed. This is, I think, is the strategy of this agreement. I don't see the Iranians coming to negotiate, and if they want to negotiate, only after we destroy whatever is needed to destroy. And I think that with this situation if this situation will be clear, it will be big achievement to America and to Israel, and I believe that it can be achieved.
General Kupelwasser, yesterday there were reports about an invasion by the Kurdish elements of the PKK, so to speak, the PJAK. that was subsequently confirmed as wrong. But nonetheless, looking at various separatists' movements and utilizing them for the purpose of bringing about some sort of change, is that something that may not cause more challenges than opportunities, considering the fact of the implications that this could cause to potentially even draw in Turkey or Azerbaijan into the mix, and having separatist elements threaten the national aspirations, so to speak, since it's a very national uprising by the Persians themselves in Iran proper?
Well, the Iranian opposition is a very complicated structure. And amongst it, you have some groups that belong to the minorities or represent the minorities. And one of them that is most prominent is the Kurdish opposition, the Iranian Kurdish opposition. And if we want to bring about a regime change or to create the conditions for the regime change that the people of Iran should implement, then one of the fractions that have to be included is the Kurds, and just like the Baluchis and the Ahvazis and many others. So they have to be ready for that, and they are looking for the proper time, the appropriate time to move forward, like everybody else in Iran. President Trump said, he asked them to stay at home for the time being before the time is ripe. And because of that, I think that these rumors about an operation by the Kurdish opposition were premature. And, we are not yet there. And but they are going to be involved in some one way or another. And the President of the United States keeps in touch with them, just as I believe the Americans are in touch with the other factions of the opposition. And yes, we are not going to change the regime, but there is a hope that everything that is going to be done by Israel and the United States is going to pave the road for the oppositions. That's more than one opposition in Iran to move forward. The most important thing is what's going to happen in Tehran eventually, because the Kurds are operating in their territory in the northwestern part of Iran, but you don't expect them to take care of changing the regime in Tehran. So we need the people of Tehran to go to the streets as well at a certain stage when the time is ripe. We are not yet there, but we are working on that. If we are following the attacks carried out by the Israelis in Tehran recently, they are focused on Basij and the IRGC headquarters, hoping that they are going to be weakened enough so that the people of Tehran are going to be feeling safe enough and self-confident enough to move to the streets when the time is ripe again. And we have to be ready to and prepared to launch a war that's going to last several weeks at least. We are very impatient. We think that, okay, 3-4 days, enough. But this is going to last a couple of weeks, and we have to be prepared for that. And maybe, who knows, maybe this is going to work. Yes, I agree with everybody who says that it hasn't been tried successfully in the past. But this is every case is unique, and here we have the vast population that looks for a change, that shows already how what kind of risks they're ready to take in order to bring about this change. So if we are going to help them feel secure when they move, maybe they're going to be successful. Who knows?
Well, in most cases, a specific battle, General Kuperwasser, brought about the downfall of multiple countries. So to have a specific battle have a change, potentially, if we go back to the battle between the Ottomans and the Persians, or back in 1514, the Turkish artillery was the one that ultimately brought about the defeat of their Persian adversaries, and ultimately allowed them to conquer much of Persia, even though they did withdraw later. And I won't go into history since we don't have very much time left.
But one thing is,
General Kuperwasser, we still have roughly 2 minutes, and I'd like to give those to General Amidrol. General Amidrol, how do you see the countries in the region react to the current complexity?
This is the most the most interesting question that we'll have to see what will be the reaction. I'm not sure that all of them will react the same way. I'm not sure that Azerbaijan will react like Qatar and Qatar like the Emirates. I think that it is probably one of the mistakes that the Iranians are doing because they don't have any real answer to the main forces which are attacking them. It's the Americans and Israel, and they try to make something that will bring chaos, and with the hope that the countries in the region will put pressure on the Americans to stop. I'm not sure that that will work, not at all. I think it might lead to a totally different situation in which they decide, those countries which had been attacked, they decide to support the Americans and the Israelis, if not to be engaged directly. But let's see what will happen. I think that if I want to go back to the previous question, we should not lie to ourselves. We cannot guarantee a regime change. What we can guarantee is much weaker regime. If that lead to regime change, good. If not, at least we will have Iran, which cannot be as aggressive as it was before the war, and Israel and America will be in a position to come back whenever it will be needed if the Iranians go back to their initial plans to have nuclear military capability and thousands of missiles.
Well, we can also realize another miracle since we're in Purim right now, and there were such miracles in the past. But with that, I'd like to thank General Kupelwasser and General Amitrol for your insights today. Also, General Kimmett, who had to leave prematurely. But also in that context, I'd like to point out that the Iranians are very tactical in their approach right now, as you mentioned about the Gulf states, and not very strategic. So tactics absent strategy is the loudest path to defeat. We're waiting for that defeat of theirs. And until our next update on this, I'd like to thank you at home as well. From here in Jerusalem, Shalom.
For more of TV7 Israel's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.